Hey nerds, this is one of my more conversational videos. I want to have a bit of a chat today about the flop era and how we're interacting with media and how we're responding and reacting to it. And this is all kind of a personal reaction to what I keep seeing, specifically about the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. But it's not just about that, it is a wider discussion that I think that I have had with you before and I want to keep having because I want us to try to find a way out of this. But I'm hoping that we maybe finally are. Now, the kind of catalyst for all of this comes mostly from interactions that I'm seeing online, specifically on Threads. When the movie was coming out, we kept seeing things from, posters basically saying like, nobody asked for this. Disney never learns from what it's done before and it's going to flop. Why are they even making this? Who is this for? And I find that a really interesting topic. Like, the nobody asked for this comments are insane to me because nobody asked for any movies. Nobody asked for any TV shows. Nobody asked for any books, any music, any albums. That's not the point of these things. That's not the point of like art or storytelling, isn't to write or create what's being asked for. Now, sometimes people do, because if there's a huge fan base for something, they're like, please make this into a movie, or we want to see this character on screen, then someone might come along and go, I can write a story for them. But most of the time when we're dealing with what we see or when media comes out, it's about what the person creating it wanted to create. And they are creating it to share it with the world in the hopes that the world will like and enjoy it. Now, there's going to be an aspect to it of a consideration that's going to be, taken where people might think like, oh, is there an audience for this? I mean, that's always going to be the case, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's TV, movies, music, books. But whether there's an audience for it or not doesn't really dictate whether the piece of media gets created. It dictates how it's created, who creates it, and how it gets spread. Like bringing up and saying things like nobody asked for this just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when we're talking about movie making. We seem to have developed this really warped sense, and I think this warped sense that we're getting is coming from how we are interacting and communicating online, and it's making people very confused about what should and shouldn't be made and the reasons why things should and shouldn't be made. Now, the second thing then that happens is that once it gets released, people rant and rage about it being a flop. Disney's finished, Star Wars is dead, it's a flop, total box office flop. The specific project doesn't matter though, because we're seeing a pattern with this. It is happening consistently. It's happened with Captain Marvel, with the Marvels, with Starfield Academy. It's happening now with Supergirl, all Star Wars projects, all Marvel projects, most DC projects, most Star Trek projects. It's happening with specific fandoms, which is really interesting because we're not really seeing it so much with individual projects. When an individual project comes out, most people seem to kind of cheer it on or be accepting of it or just let it pass by as normal. But when a franchise makes something new, people seem to feel like they have some sort of ownership over the franchise, over the decisions that are made, and feel like they then get to make a choice or that their input is valid. But like, look, I have said this before, we all have a voice, but not all of our voices are equal in all circumstances. And that's just the truth of it. You can have your opinion, it doesn't mean it's right. But the point of this discussion and the point of this like flop era topic that I'm bringing up is that it's not about whether the projects succeed or fail. It's the desire that people have for them to fail. Like, before it's come out, they want it. They almost thirst for it to fail. They want to see it fall down on its face, and then they want to cheer and revel in it. And my question to that is, why? For like, what does that serve? What purpose is there for that reaction? And what does that get you or get any of us really? Now, like I said, the nobody asked for this phrase like fascinates me. And like I said, nobody asks for movies. Nobody asked for Star Wars, Alien, Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, all to be made originally. Creative people create things because they want to create them. The audience can then decide whether you want to connect with it or not, and you don't have to. Some projects will become a cultural phenomena, but some of them don't. They just pass by and you go, oh, that movie that one time. But this idea that art should exist only if there's already a proven demand beforehand is a really strange way to think about a creative process. It's treating entertainment like a specific product category rather than a creative medium. And I think that that's the thing. We view it because we purchase it, because we pay to go and see it in the cinema, because we pay to rent it, or we might buy the DVD, that makes it a product, and then you have input into how that product should be presented. And like I said, we don't have that reaction for individual projects, I guess because the individual project appears and then passes us by. But when it comes to these franchises and we have these fandoms that are invested in the franchise, you start to treat every bit as like a piece of merchandise, and therefore you have a right to say if you don't like the merchandise and they should change it. But again, that's not how the creative process works. But the biggest thing that gets me about all of this discourse that I see online is like, when did we become shareholders? Like, I don't remember us having conversations about movies and TV shows like 10 to 15 years ago, right? We used to discuss the stories or the characters, the themes, the performances, the effects that were being used, the sets, the locations, like, you know, the cinematography, the soundscapes or the soundtracks. But now the conversation seems to just jump immediately to budgets, box office, opening weekends, projections, return on investment, audience retention, ratings. Like, most of the people making the arguments have absolutely no financial stake in the outcome, so why are they so invested in it? It's like all these commentators online are unpaid financial analysts for Hollywood or something. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why they care so much. My biggest point here, and I've made this point before, is that the world changed. Like, a lot of the discussions that are being had around this rely on comparisons that don't make sense anymore. All of these people are comparing these like modern today releases to Endgame era numbers as though nothing changed between then and now. But hello, newsflash, there was a global pandemic. I don't know if you remember that happening. Everything changed. COVID accelerated the streaming adoption that we all took on, home entertainment, and changed our viewing habits drastically. Not just that, but technology has been advancing more and more. We now all have massive TVs, we have excellent sound systems, we have easy access to streaming services. The theatrical window that used to exist has collapsed. We now know that we can watch a new release movie at home within weeks. Sometimes it's even out for rental when it is still in the cinema. Going to the cinema to watch a movie is an event. It's not the default way to see new releases anymore. That changes what the box office performance is going to be. If you know that a big movie is coming out that you would like to see, but you know that you're going to be able to see it in a couple of weeks and you can watch it at home, a lot of people are choosing to do that rather than going out. There are a lot of components that make people feel more comfortable or happier to have like a movie night at home rather than go to the cinema. Now, sure, there are still movies that come out that people will prefer to see it on the big screen in that big moment. But not all movies are necessarily made for that moment. You know, it's like, I saw Project Hail Mary in IMAX. It was incredible. It was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And I would totally recommend seeing that movie on a big screen if you can. There is no doubt about it that I will be in the cinema on day one for Dune Part 3. No way in hell I am not watching that on a massive screen. But there's a lot of other movies coming out like between now and then that I do not feel the need to see on a big screen. I don't feel like it has to be that, unless I want like a nice date night, or I want to go and just, see something fun with a friend. We just don't consume and interact with it in the same way anymore. But not just that, like a lot of these box office comparisons are pretty freaking weird. Like they're comparing movies that have absolutely nothing in common, that are in different genres, and have entirely different audiences and different box office takes, as if there's some sort of direct comparison between them. Like take the Mandalorian and Grogu stuff at the moment, where a lot of people are talking about that in comparison with this movie Obsession. Now the movie Obsession, smaller box office, or smaller budget, sorry, and it is doing incredibly well. But spoiler alert, horror movies historically performed really well at the box office because it just happens to be a genre that people prefer to watch in a group setting. A lot of people prefer to have company when they're watching a horror movie because it adds to the experience. The reactions of the audience feed into all part of the feeling that you have from watching horror movies. And horror movies don't necessarily have the same kind of a budget that big epic sci-fi movies would have, or big action movies might have. So it's really not that surprising that a horror movie would do well at the box office. But this weird comparison to say that it's smashing The Mandalorian and Grogu, it's not. The reason people are saying this is what they're doing is they are looking at the budgets for both movies, and then they're looking at the box office takings for both movies, and they're comparing the difference. So because the box office taking versus budget difference is smaller on The Mandalorian and Grogu, whereas it's much larger on Obsession because it was made for a smaller budget and it's making good money, people are saying that that means that Obsession is beating The Mandalorian and Grogu at the box office. It makes no sense. That comparison makes absolutely no sense. It's really weird. Like, they're not comparable projects. The success of each of them is contextual, right? So yes, Obsession is doing really well. After 3 weeks in the box office, it made a good bit of money, but it hasn't made more than what The Mandalorian and Grogu made. The Mandalorian and Grogu still made more in its opening weekend than the entire 3 weeks of the Obsession box office. So this comparison is just people arguing numbers, and I struggle to understand why this argument or this fight that people get into about numbers and figures is a more valid argument on whether something is a good product or not, or a good piece of media. And that brings me to a topic that I have definitely talked about before, and that's to do with the attention economy. So a lot of the arguments that people make and a lot of the complaints, like, we know where they're coming from. When they're talking about Captain Marvel, the Marvels, Miss Marvel, there's a theme there. But even like bringing that into Starfleet Academy and a lot of the Star Wars projects that have had very negative reactions and results, we know where a lot of that has come from. The Mandalorian and Grogu is a slightly different situation, because from an outside perspective, or just from just a general overall outlook to it, it's not an immediately what these complainers refer to as woke, wine, whatever. But this idea, right? So looking at it, which then makes you kind of go, okay, why are they complaining about it? Because they complain about every single Star Wars project. It doesn't matter what it is. But why specifically this one? And this is where the attention economy comes into it. And I've spoken about this before. It's about the internet itself, because the modern internet rewards outrage, it rewards certainty, conflict, and this tribalism behavior. It doesn't reward nuance. If you want to review a movie or give commentary on it online, if you say that movie was okay, no one's really interested, unless you're like a really well-known and well-respected critic who people really like the nuance of your opinion. You're not going to get as many views as someone who puts up a thumbnail saying Disney destroyed. It's just about engagement. The incentives here are obvious. This isn't limited to monetized creators either, right? Because even on platforms where people aren't earning money, they're still competing for attention, likes, reposts, engagement, validation, because that's what they want. And we all know it. Rage is one of the easiest ways to get all of those things. So it's easier for them to jump straight in and just be like, oh my God, it's a flop, it's terrible, it's awful, it's destroyed, everything's ruined, this is catastrophic, they should just quit now, will they never learn? All of that gets a hell of a lot more than an actual honest discussion and conversation about what people thought about the story or the performances or the visuals or, you know, the pacing. But the thing is, a lot of this outrage comes before the actual piece of media itself. The actual quality of the project always feels secondary. The outrage framework already existed before anyone saw the movie. They were prepared, they were primed, everyone was just sitting waiting. Everyone probably already had their videos recorded so that they could put them out, or their threads posts scheduled for the day of release so that they could be the first ones to be shouting and roaring into the void. Now, a lot of these attitudes that we have, a lot of these things that we see of people being like very aggressive online, and a lot of this anti-wokeism stuff is what my friend refers to, my friend Megan, she calls it the death rattle of a dying generation. And I would like to imagine that that's what it is that's going on. Whether it's true or not, it's definitely something that is interesting to me here, because it just feels like people are desperately trying to preserve this version of culture that no longer exists. Like they're really desperately trying to hang on to some sort of a status quo. And because attention is harder to earn now than it was 5 years ago, this rhetoric keeps escalating. Like they have to get more extreme. Every release has to be catastrophic. It has to be company ending. It has to be proof that everything is ruined and nobody knows what they're doing in this organization. And Disney is destroyed, and Lucasfilm is destroyed, and MCU is destroyed. And Star Trek will never have another project. Like, it's just, moderate criticism doesn't get any attention anymore. Everything has to be existential. They're so dramatic. It's exhausting. But that brings me to it. Honestly, I do think with this particular cycle, now I don't know if it's because, as I said, The Mandalorian and Grogu doesn't have anything about it that is specifically able to cater into what people like to rail about, their like anti-woke stuff. So basically, you know, it's not explicitly women, people of color, or any sort of homosexuality or trans activism seen within the product. So maybe that's why the outrage isn't as extreme, or there's a lot more pushback against people who are feigning their outrage about it. I don't know. But I would like to think that it is more to do with the fact that we are all just leaning into outrage fatigue. We talked about it a lot with like Marvel fatigue a while back. Everyone was talking about, it's too much. We can't. There's too many movies, there's too many TV shows. We can't do everything. Stop. So I'm hoping that maybe now we're all starting to experience a bit of outrage fatigue, because we've seen it all. Like, it's nothing new, right? It's the same thumbnails, it's the same headlines, it's the same talking points, it's the same scripts. We all know exactly what they're going to say before any of them say it. And I am finding myself, honestly, a lot more, and it's for my own peace of mind, and I'm actually quite proud of myself for this, simply clicking not interested. Don't recommend that channel to me. Block. And just move on. And I do wonder, are other people doing the same? Like, I really hope that they are. Now, I see why people do the outrage stuff, and I see why people do the rage baiting, because it gets more attention. You grow faster, you get more viral clips, you get more engagement, which then leads you into this false sense of security that what you've got going on is going to get you somewhere. And if all you care about is attention or money, then, you know, you can probably do well for a short period of time, because it's not sustainable. Nobody wants to engage and interact with that long term. Like, it's not going to give you this good audience that are going to stick with you as you move through new projects, as we move on. Like, where are you going with this? What is the future of these types of videos and these rage baiters? The creators who will stand or survive long term will foster discussion and curiosity and connection, not like this perpetual anger. It's so uncomfortable. Like you might have a reaction, and I've had it in the past where there's been a project that's come out and or maybe an adaptation or maybe a book that I've read, and I've been like, oh my god, this really just, and I've had a little like about it. I try to be a bit more careful about that kind of reaction these days, because like we have to remember that no matter what, people are always involved, right? People are involved in every book that I read. Somebody spent a long time writing it. There was an editor, there were marketing people, and there are other people out there who love it. And the same with any TV show and any movie or, you know, any album, whatever it is. There are things that I will not enjoy, and there are things that I have valid criticisms and valid arguments about that are worth a discussion. But I'm never going to watch something, go, I didn't like that, and then go on the internet and just shout about how stupid it was and just be like, oh my God, nobody should watch this. If I'm going to criticize something, I want to talk about the good parts of it as well as the bad parts of it. And I want to give a reasonable and cohesive argument as to why I didn't personally like it, but also make sure that it is always in the frame of like my personal feeling and my personal opinion. And that doesn't mean it's the right one. It's just how I felt about it. And you can agree or disagree. That's fine. It's perfectly possible to dislike something and talk about why you didn't like it. Everyone is able to do that. Those conversations are valuable. The problem isn't having a criticism about something. The problem is the criticism being replaced by engagement farming. I'm going to say this. I posted a video. It was the Neil deGrasse Tyson interview, which I started this new thing, right? So I've started a few new things on the channel recently, and it's just because I'm trying to explore different ways of communicating the topics and the ideas and how I feel about things. And I wanted to do interviews with people, but I didn't want the interviews, they're not going to, of course an interview is not going to be the same format as when I do a science explainer video. When I do a science explainer video, that is very structured, that is very well planned, that is, I spend a lot of time researching and writing and checking the science and making sure that I've structured it in such a way that I think makes sense and that someone can watch it and understand, but also, you know, that I'm talking about it in a way that is interesting and exciting to me. And people like that. A discussion episode with somebody else, for me, like I call them nerd exchange, it's about them enjoying the conversation. It's about them getting a chance to talk about something that they're excited about, that they get to nerd out about, that they're like, oh, this is the thing that I do, or this is a cool thing that I'm involved in, or this is something that I like talking about. And it's about that discourse. And through that conversation, my hope is that it will either A, get, you know, somebody watching excited and interested in the thing that the guest is excited and interested in, and B, that people will learn something new about a topic that they don't normally hear about maybe, or they mightn't engage in a lot. So I posted the one with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and somebody commented, and there's someone who has followed me for a while and they've commented on multiple videos. I recognize their username, and they commented and they simply said, I wanted to enjoy this, but I didn't. Oh well. And I looked at that and I just thought, right, that is a valid opinion to have. You are perfectly allowed to have that opinion, but I don't understand the reason for commenting it. Right? Like what, who are you telling? Like who are you telling, and what does that statement serve? I wanted to enjoy this, but I didn't. Oh well. What information is that giving? Okay, so firstly, if you're trying to tell other people that you didn't, you know, like a book review or something, if you're trying to say to other people, this is what I thought of, but you didn't give an opinion on what you thought of it, you just said you didn't enjoy it. So then it's like, okay, so how are other people supposed to discern whether they will enjoy it based on your opinion of that? But it's not directed at other people, it's directed at me. It's because they want to tell me that they personally did not like the thing that I made. And then that leads me to why. Like and a lot of people will say, we're allowed to say that we don't like things, and we're allowed to give criticism and give constructive feedback. And yes, it comes back to the not all voices are valid in all circumstances, right? So in that respect, it's like, yes, you absolutely, of course you're allowed to not like something. And of course you're allowed to vocalize if you don't like something. But what is the point of vocalizing you don't like something to the person who created it if you're not giving any other information? Basically, the point I'm trying to make is that if you watch something from somebody that you normally follow and you normally like what they do and you didn't like it, like if there was something about it, then I would think that you would choose to respond with like, oh, I wish you'd talked about this, or oh, I would have loved to hear more about this topic, if that's what you're looking for. In which case then I can go, oh, okay, cool. I'll go and find somebody who maybe is an expert in that topic and we can have a conversation about that. Or the next time I'm talking to someone and we're talking about like something adjacent to this, I can maybe get into a bit more detail. Like I can think and I can plan and I can go like, ooh, because that's what's important to me within this community that I am trying to create here within this nerd club, is that I learn the types of things that you guys want to know about, and then I try to find the information or the people who can talk about it and I can bring that to you. That's the point of it. But if all somebody says is, I didn't enjoy this, that is not valuable information. That is not useful feedback. That doesn't give you anything that you can actually work with. It's just somebody complaining. So that's the point, is that criticism is fine. You can be critical. You can say, I didn't like this for this reason, or I wish you had had this conversation, or I would have enjoyed more if it was this way. And people can then choose in the future what to do with that criticism, if it's constructive or if it's something they just want to dismiss because it doesn't actually align with what they want to put out there in the world, because we're all allowed our own creative freedoms in the things that we create and make. When you then switch it into just negativity just for the sake of negativity, complaining just for the sake of complaining, and then rage baiting for the sake of content farming or engagement farming, then it becomes completely invalid. It's no longer criticism. It's no longer a personal opinion. It holds no value to anyone other than you, and is to satisfy a personal feeling that you have in the moment. Or, like I said, for a lot of these people, it's about just attention economy. So in saying all of that, where I've kind of landed is, as soon as someone's argument is it was a flop, they are no longer talking about the media itself. They are talking about a freaking spreadsheet, one that they're not even involved in. They're talking about like a corporation's quarterly performance, like the numbers that they're coming in. They're worrying about the finances of Disney here. And that's a really strange cultural shift that the internet has produced here, because we've become so obsessed with whether things are succeeding financially based on the numbers, and it all ties into, you know, the engagement metrics, you know, how many views are you getting, how many likes are you getting, how many comments are you getting. We're viewing success as that, instead of whether the output meant something to us. Like, the truth is, you can make a video and, you know, 5 people can watch it, and maybe 3 of those people thought it was one of the best things they'd ever seen. You've given 3 people something wonderful. It doesn't matter, like, I mean, look, let's be real. Of course, in this day and age, it matters, especially if you're monetized and you don't have PhD funding anymore and you need to make some money. Views do matter, and you got to play a little bit of an algorithm game, whatever. But the point is that when you are creating something, when people are being creative, when they're putting something out there, the goal is always just to try to reach people in some meaningful way, not just for people to complain about how many people watched it, not what the thoughts and experiences of were the people who actually watched it. But maybe that's changing. Maybe people are getting tired of it, and maybe we are finally reaching the end of the flop era, as we call it or deem it to be. I don't know. I've talked for a lot longer than I intended to talk, but I do want to know what you guys think. I want to know what your opinions are on all of this. How do you feel about it when you see these posts online, when you see people on threads and all the rage stuff comes up? Have you found yourself clicking not interested and blocking and just moving on, or do you still feel drawn into it? I definitely don't feel as drawn into reactions to these things as I did. Maybe that's just personal growth, or maybe it is just, like I said, this outrage exhaustion, and we're all just getting a little bit bored of watching these engagement farmers try to manipulate our emotions in order for them to just make a bit of cash in the short term, because I cannot see how this is sustainable. I cannot see how we will still sit here in 5 years' time watching these same videos with these same thumbnails popping up, talking about how everything is ruined and destroyed and Disney should quit and Star Trek should quit. I don't know, man. Maybe as an audience, whether we are interested in it as a piece of media or not, need to get in behind Supergirl before it comes out. Maybe we all need to start trying to spread a little bit of positivity and a bit of joy and excitement again, instead of letting these rage farmers try to flood our feeds again just because they dared make a show about a woman. Oh no. Terrible. It's the world ending. You guys know what I think. Okay, thanks for listening to me prattle on about this, and have a lovely week. Stay nerdy.